The crystal towers of Serenity Prime gleamed under the light of three suns. Council leader Vextar stood in his office high above the city, watching the morning light dance across the peaceful streets below. His blue skin shimmered as he moved, and his forearms worked smoothly across multiple data screens. For 3,000 years, this world had known nothing but peace. That peace ended when the emergency alert pierced the morning quiet. Vextar's large eyes widened as the first reports came in. 3 star systems had gone completely dark in the past week. No communications, no trade signals, nothing at all. In a galaxy where every world stayed connected through quantum networks, this silence was impossible. "Bring me the sector commanders," Vextar ordered his assistant, a small gray being named Kilton. "Something is very wrong." Within an hour, the emergency council gathered in the great chamber. Representatives from 40 different species filled the curved seats, their voices creating a low hum of worry. Holographic displays showed the affected systems as red dots on the galactic map. Commander Thelvik of the Outer Rim Forces spoke first. "We sent probe ships to investigate. None returned. The last transmission we received was from Survey Ship 7. They reported massive energy readings, then the signal cut to static." "What kind of energy?" asked Dr. Nalseth, the Federation's chief scientist. Her green tentacles moved nervously as she spoke, unknown. "The readings were unlike anything in our databases." Vextar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. "Show me the historical records. Search for similar events." The great screen above them filled with ancient text and images. Most of the council had never seen these files before. They were from the old archives, sealed away for 12,000 years. "Here," Dr. Nalseth said, her voice barely a whisper. "The Devourer War. It happened so long ago that most species consider it a myth. The images showed worlds stripped bare of all life. Empty planets with their surfaces scarred and blackened, ship hulls that looked like they had been eaten from the inside, and creatures that defied description, living shadows that consumed everything they touched. The records say they came from the galactic core," Dr. Nalseth continued. "They spread across space like a plague, consuming entire civilizations. Whole species vanished in weeks. The war lasted 300 years before they mysteriously disappeared." "Disappeared how?" Vextar asked. "No one knows. The records just say they retreated back to the core and were never seen again." Commander Thelvik pulled up the current tactical display. "If these are the same creatures, we need to act fast. Based on their previous patterns, they could consume half the galaxy before we mount an effective defense." "Then we mount that defense," Vextar declared. "Send out the call. Every member species must contribute ships and troops." Over the next 2 days, responses came in from across the galaxy. Each one was the same: polite refusal. The Ethereal Collective sent a formal message. "We have evolved beyond physical conflict. Violence contradicts our spiritual development. We will pray for your success." The Clockwork Empire's response was more direct. "Our calculations show a 0.3% chance of victory against the ancient enemy. We cannot risk our perfectly ordered society on such poor odds." Even the warrior poet Zephyrians, who had fought beside the Federation for centuries, declined. "This enemy cannot be defeated through honor or skill. It is a force of nature, like trying to fight a star or a black hole." One by one, every advanced civilization in the galaxy found reasons to avoid the fight. Some cited practical concerns about logistics and supply lines. Others claimed philosophical objections to warfare. A few simply ignored the messages entirely. Vextar stood in his office again, watching the city below. In just 5 days, 3 more systems had gone dark. The Devourers were moving faster now, and the Federation stood alone. "Sir," Kilton's voice came through the intercom. "We have an incoming transmission." Another refusal. "No, sir. Someone is accepting our call for aid." Vextar hurried to the communication center. The main screen showed static, then cleared to reveal a human face. The creature looked young by human standards, with short brown hair and determined eyes. Behind him, Vextar could see what looked like a military command center. "This is Admiral Ben Collins of the United Earth Naval Command," the human said. "We received your distress call about the Devourer threat. Help is on the way." Vextar blinked all 4 eyes in surprise. Earth was barely a footnote in Federation records. A small violent world on the galactic rim, classified as unsuitable for civilized life. The survey team that had visited decades ago had described it as a death world, where the native species fought constant wars against each other and their hostile environment. Admiral Collins, Vextar said carefully, we appreciate your response. But I must ask, how many ships can Earth provide? Our entire fleet, 300 combat vessels plus support ships. We're already moving out from home base. 300 ships from a single world? Most Federation members could barely maintain 50 vessels, and those were designed for peaceful exploration, not warfare. Admiral, you should understand the nature of this threat. Ancient records suggest the Devourers destroyed thousands of advanced civilizations. Many species with technology far superior to yours fell before them. Collins's expression didn't change. With respect, Council Leader, we've read your historical files. We know what we're up against. Then why are you coming? Every other species has calculated the odds and decided the fight is hopeless. For the first time, the human smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Maybe that's why they lost last time. Someone has to fight or everyone dies. That's pretty simple math even for us primitive Death Worlders. The transmission ended, leaving Vextar staring at a blank screen. Around him, the communication center buzzed with activity as technicians tried to process what had just happened. Sir? One of them called out. We're detecting massive energy signatures moving through human space. Multiple fleets converging on Earth. How many ships? The readings are unprecedented. I count at least 300 major vessels, plus twice that many support craft. Dr. Nalseth appeared at Vextar's side. Council Leader, I've been reviewing the human files. Their species has been fighting wars continuously for their entire recorded history. They've never known true peace. That's exactly why the survey team classified their world as too dangerous for contact. Perhaps, but consider this. They've survived and thrived on a planet that would kill most of our species within hours. Their gravity is 3 times our standard. Their atmosphere is corrosive to many of our member races. Their weather patterns include storms that could level our cities. Vextar was beginning to understand. You're saying they might actually have a chance against the Devourers? I'm saying they're the only species that volunteered to try. While everyone else calculated odds and risk factors, they simply decided to fight. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected the human fleet approaching Federation space. Vextar watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The human ships looked nothing like the elegant curved vessels used by civilized species. They were angular, brutal things covered in armor plating and weapon systems. Council Leader, Commander Thelvik, reported, the human fleet is requesting permission to dock at Serenity Prime. Granted. Prepare the diplomatic quarters for their leaders. Sir, there's something else. Our sensors show these ships have been in combat recently. Multiple times. Combat with whom? Unknown. But several vessels show battle damage that's been repaired during flight. These humans have been fighting someone on their way here. As the first human ships entered orbit around Serenity Prime, Vexitar realized that the galaxy was about to change forever. For 12,000 years, civilized space had known peace through diplomacy and careful avoidance of conflict. Now faced with an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, they had called upon the one species that had never learned to stop fighting. The Death Worlders were coming, and Vextar found himself hoping they were everything the ancient records claimed them to be. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance watching Serenity Prime grow larger on the main screen. The planet was beautiful in a way that made his teeth ache. Too perfect, too clean, like a picture that had never been tested by real life. First time seeing a Federation core world, Captain? Asked Commander Lisa Park from her position at the tactical station. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her eyes never left the sensor readings. Yeah. Makes you wonder how they've survived this long without getting eaten by something nasty. Maybe that's why they called us, Park replied. Finally found something nastier than their diplomats can handle. The communication officer looked up from her station. Captain, we're being hailed by Federation traffic control. They want to assign us a parking orbit about 50,000 kilometers out. Morrison frowned. 50,000? That's awfully far from the planet. They probably don't want our scary warships too close to their pretty cities, Park said with a slight smile. Tell them we'll take a standard orbital position at 2,000 kilometers. We didn't come here to admire the view from deep space. The communication officer winced. Sir, they're insisting on the 50,000-kilometer distance. Something about safety protocols. Morrison's jaw tightened. He'd been fighting pirates and raiders for the past 6 months just to get here. And now these people wanted to treat his battle-scarred fleet like a plague ship. Put me through to Admiral Collins on the Retribution. The main screen split to show Admiral Ben Collins in his command chair. The older man looked tired but alert, his gray hair neat despite the long journey from Earth. Problem, Captain? Local traffic control wants us parked halfway to the next moon. Apparently we make them nervous, Collins nodded. I'm getting similar messages from the other task force commanders. The Federation seems more worried about us than the things that are eating their planets. Orders, sir? Standard combat orbits around the planet. If they don't like it, they can file a complaint after we save their civilization. Morrison grinned. Understood, Admiral. The Federation officials were still protesting when the human fleet settled into tight formation around Serenity Prime. 300 warships in perfect battle order. Their weapons powered down but ready for instant activation. 2 hours later, Morrison found himself in the Federation Council chambers alongside Admiral Collins and Dr. Maya Rodriguez, the fleet's chief xenobiologist. The chamber was impressive, all flowing curves and soft lighting designed to promote calm discussion. Council leader Vextar greeted them with formal courtesy, his forearms moving in what Morrison assumed was some kind of diplomatic gesture. The alien was tall and graceful, with blue skin that seemed to glow faintly in the chamber's light. Welcome to Serenity Prime, Admiral Collins. We are grateful for your response to our call for aid. We came as fast as we could, Collins replied. What's the current tactical situation? Vextar exchanged glances with the other council members. Perhaps we should begin with a more comprehensive briefing. Dr. Nalseth has prepared a detailed analysis of the threat. A green tentacled alien stepped forward, activating a holographic display. The creatures we face are unlike anything in current galactic experience. They consume organic matter and convert it into additional units of their species. They appear to operate as a collective intelligence. Morrison studied the display, which showed grainy images of dark, writhing shapes attacking a space station. What are their numbers? Unknown. They destroyed our monitoring stations before we could get accurate counts. What about their ships? Weapons, defensive capabilities? Dr. Nalseth looked uncomfortable. We have very limited data on their technology. The few probe ships that survived long enough to transmit reported that the creatures seemed to absorb conventional energy weapons. Admiral Collins leaned forward. You're saying our weapons might not work against them? That is a possibility we must consider. Morrison felt his patience running thin. With respect, Doctor, might not work isn't intelligence. It's guesswork. What exactly do you know about these things? The chamber fell silent. Morrison realized he'd probably violated about 6 different diplomatic protocols, but he didn't care. People were dying while these aliens held academic discussions. Vextar spoke carefully. Captain Morrison, we understand your eagerness to engage the enemy. However, the Federation has always believed in thorough preparation before taking action. How thorough? Collins asked. Our preliminary planning committee estimates they will need 6 months to develop a comprehensive strategic assessment. Morrison stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. 6 months? How many worlds will be dead by then? Captain, Vextar said, his voice taking on a stern tone. This is how civilized species conduct military operations. Proper planning prevents unnecessary casualties. Unnecessary casualties, Morrison repeated. You mean like the 3 million people who died on Kepler 7 yesterday while you were forming committees? Dr. Rodriguez, who had been quietly reviewing the Federation data, looked up from her tablet. The biological samples you've provided are fascinating. These creatures are essentially living conversion factories. But the interesting thing is they can be killed. How do you know? Dr. Nalseth asked. Because they're biological, not energy beings. Biology has limits. It can be disrupted, damaged, destroyed. The question isn't whether we can kill them, it's whether we can kill them fast enough. Commander Park appeared on Morrison's communicator. Captain, long-range sensors are picking up massive movement in the outer rim sectors. Multiple fleets heading this way. Morrison looked at the Federation Council members. Looks like your planning period just got shorter. Admiral Collins stood. Council leader, we appreciate your desire for careful preparation, but we need to move now. Every hour we delay gives these things more time to multiply and spread. Admiral, surely you understand that rushing into battle without proper intelligence is suicide. Collins smiled grimly. Maybe. But sitting here while they eat the galaxy is definitely suicide. At least our way we go down fighting. Vextar's forearms moved in what Morrison was learning was a gesture of distress. The Federation has maintained peace for 3 millennia by avoiding precisely this kind of reckless action. And how's that working out for you now? Morrison asked. The chamber erupted in angry voices as several council members began speaking at once. Morrison caught fragments of the argument, something about proper procedures, diplomatic solutions, and the dangers of primitive thinking. Dr. Rodriguez's voice cut through the noise. If I may interrupt, I think I've found something important in your historical records. The chamber quieted as the human scientist activated her own holographic display. It showed star charts from the ancient Devourer War, with marked battle sites and fleet movements. Your ancestors fought these creatures for 300 years and eventually drove them back. The records show they used tactics very similar to what Admiral Collins is proposing. Rapid response, aggressive engagement, accepting heavy casualties to prevent the enemy from establishing secure breeding grounds. Dr. Nalseth studied the display. But those civilizations were far more primitive than we are now. They relied on crude weapons and barbaric tactics, and they won, Morrison pointed out. Your civilized approach got 3 star systems eaten in a week. Admiral Collins stepped forward. Council leader, we respect your authority in Federation space. But with or without your approval, we're going to engage these creatures. The only question is whether we do it with your support or despite your objections. Vextar was quiet for a long moment, his large eyes studying the humans. Finally he spoke. Very well. But we insist on sending Federation observers with your fleet. Someone needs to document what happens when the Deathworlders go to war. Morrison grinned. Fair enough, but your observers better be ready for a rough ride. As the meeting broke up, Morrison found himself walking beside Dr. Rodriguez toward the docking bay. Doctor, you really think we can beat these things? She was quiet for a moment. Honestly, Captain? I don't know. But I know one thing for certain. We're the only ones willing to try. And sometimes that's enough. Back on the Defiance, Morrison stood on the bridge as the human fleet prepared to leave orbit. The Federation had provided them with star charts and what little tactical data they had, but it wasn't much to go on. All ships report ready, Captain, Park announced. Set course for the Kepler system. Maximum burn. That's where the latest attacks were reported, Park observed. Then that's where we'll find our enemy. Morrison settled into his command chair. Signal the fleet. Time to show these ancient nightmares what happens when you mess with a death world. The UES Defiance and her sister ships turned away from the beautiful, peaceful world of Serenity Prime and headed into the darkness where something hungry was waiting for them. The Kepler 7 system looked like a graveyard when the human fleet arrived. What had once been a thriving mining colony was now a collection of dark, lifeless rocks orbiting a dying star. The mining stations that should have been bustling with activity hung silent in space, their metal hulls twisted and scarred. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance studying the tactical display. The system wasn't empty. Long-range sensors showed movement near the asteroid belt, but it wasn't anything that appeared on their identification charts. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, announced Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the sensor station. Multiple bogies moving in formation. Put it on screen, Morrison ordered. The main display filled with an image that made several bridge crew members step back in shock. The creatures were nothing like the sleek ships of civilized species. They looked more like living shadows, their dark hulls pulsing with internal light. Some were small, about the size of human fighters. Others were massive, easily matching the largest Federation battleships. My God, whispered Commander Lisa Park. They're beautiful. Morrison shot her a look. Beautiful? In a terrifying nightmare kind of way. Look at how they move. It's like watching sharks in deep water. Dr. Maya Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom from the science lab. Captain, I'm reading massive biological signatures from those ships. They're not machines at all. They're living creatures. Living ships? More than that. Each vessel appears to be a single organism. And Captain, I'm detecting smaller life forms inside the larger ones. Thousands of them. Morrison felt his stomach tighten. Crew members? More like offspring. The big ones are carrying smaller ones, probably ready to deploy them as boarding parties or fighters. the Federation observer on the bridge, a tall, thin alien named Observer Keithvar, spoke up in a nervous voice. "Captain, standard Federation protocol in this situation would be to withdraw and request reinforcement." "Good thing we're not Federation," Morrison replied. "All ships, battle stations. This is what we came here for." The human fleet spread out into attack formation. 300 ships against an unknown number of alien creatures that had already consumed 3 star systems. Morrison had faced worse odds before, but never against an enemy that might eat his crew if they lost. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Collins," the communication officer announced. The Admiral appeared on a secondary screen, his weathered face grim but determined. "All ships, remember your training. These things are biological, which means they can be hurt and they can be killed. Show them what happens when they threaten human space." Morrison opened a channel to his own crew. "All hands, this is the captain. We're about to engage an enemy unlike anything we've faced before. They've destroyed civilizations that were around when humans were still living in caves. But they've never faced humans before. Make them regret that oversight." The Devourers struck first. The smaller creatures broke away from the larger ones, moving with impossible speed toward the human fleet. They didn't fly in straight lines like normal ships. Instead, they twisted and writhed through space like living things swimming through water. "Evasive maneuvers," Morrison ordered. "All weapons fire at will." The space around Kepler 7 lit up with weapons fire. Human pulse cannons and missile batteries opened up on the approaching swarm. The first volley struck home, and Morrison felt a moment of satisfaction as several of the smaller creatures exploded in bursts of dark fluid. Then the satisfaction died as he saw more creatures emerging from the larger ones. For every devourer they killed, 2 more took its place. "They're adapting," Park shouted over the sound of alarms. "The ones behind are changing their flight patterns based on how the first wave died." Morrison watched in fascination and horror as the enemy swarm shifted tactics in real time. The creatures that had been flying straight began weaving unpredictably. The ones that had been alone started moving in tight groups that covered each other. "So they learn fast," Morrison said. "Good, so do we. All ships switch to rotating fire patterns. Don't give them a chance to predict our attacks." The battle became a deadly dance. Human ships used their superior speed and maneuverability to stay ahead of the larger devourers while concentrating fire on the smaller ones. But the creatures were learning with every exchange, adapting their tactics faster than anything Morrison had ever seen. "Captain." Dr. Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom, strain clear in her tone. "I'm analyzing the debris from destroyed creatures. They're not just adapting tactically, they're physically changing. The ones we're fighting now have thicker armor than the first wave." "How is that possible?" "Evolution in real time. Each generation incorporates improvements based on how the previous one died. We're not just fighting individual creatures, we're fighting a species that gets better every time we kill one of them." On the main screen, Morrison watched as one of the massive Devourer ships approached the UES Wolverine, a heavy cruiser in his task force. The alien creature was easily 3 times the size of the human ship, its dark hull rippling with movement. "Wolverine, get out of there," Morrison ordered over the fleet channel. "Negative, Defiance. We're going to ram the bastard." Morrison watched, in stunned admiration as the Wolverine increased speed directly toward the Devourer ship. At the last second, the human vessel fired every weapon it had directly into what looked like the creature's head. The explosion when the ships collided was visible across the entire system. The Devourer ship convulsed and died, its massive form going limp and beginning to drift. But the Wolverine was gone, taking her crew of 300 with her. "This is insane," Observer Keithvar said, his voice shaking. "Your people are destroying themselves to kill single enemy units. The mathematics make no sense." "Welcome to human mathematics," Park replied grimly. "Sometimes 1 + 1 = winning." The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships darted between the larger devourers, using hit-and-run tactics that slowly wore down the enemy numbers. But the cost was terrible. By Morrison's count, they had lost over 60 ships, including some of the fleet's best captains. Then something changed. The Devourers began to withdraw, pulling back toward the edge of the system. Morrison watched in surprise as the creatures that had been fighting with suicidal determination suddenly became cautious. Why are they running? Park wondered. Dr. Rodriguez provided the answer. Captain, I think they've learned enough. They're not retreating, they're regrouping. Based on the biological readings I'm getting, the surviving creatures are sharing information with each other. They're preparing for the next battle. Morrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bridge temperature. You mean they're taking what they learned here and teaching it to other swarms? Exactly. Every battle we fight makes all of them smarter and stronger. Admiral Collins's voice came over the fleet channel. All ships form up for pursuit. We can't let them escape with what they've learned. Admiral, Morrison replied, if we chase them, we'll be walking into a trap. They know our tactics now. Then we'll have to come up with new ones. Captain, we didn't come here to fight a fair battle. We came here to win a war. Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew was exhausted, his ship was damaged, and they faced an enemy that got stronger every time they fought it. By any reasonable standard, they should withdraw and regroup, but Morrison had never been particularly reasonable. Helm, set pursuit course. All weapons prepare for continuous bombardment. If these things want to learn from fighting humans, let's give them a lesson they won't forget. The UES Defiance and the remaining human fleet chased the Devourer swarm deeper into the system, toward the gas giant where long-range sensors showed even more enemy ships waiting. Morrison knew they were probably flying into certain death. He found he didn't much care. The Federation had called for help, and humans had answered. They would keep fighting until either the Devourers were dead, or there were no more humans left to fight them. Behind them, Observer Kethvar transmitted a report back to Serenity Prime. The humans have engaged the enemy. Initial casualties are severe, but they continue to advance. I do not understand their tactical doctrine, but I am beginning to understand why their species survived on a death world. They do not know how to surrender. The battle for Kepler-7 was far from over, and Morrison suspected it was only the beginning of something much larger and more terrible than any of them had imagined. 3 weeks after the battle at Kepler-7, Dr. Maya Rodriguez made a discovery that changed everything. She was in her laboratory aboard the UES Defiance, studying samples of devourer tissue they had collected from destroyed enemy ships, when the pattern finally became clear. Captain Morrison to the lab. Immediately, she announced over the intercom, her voice tight with excitement and fear. Morrison arrived to find Rodriguez hunched over her analysis equipment, surrounded by holographic displays showing star charts and biological data. Her normally neat appearance was disheveled and her eyes were red from lack of sleep. What have you found, Doctor? Rodriguez pointed to a three-dimensional map of the galaxy floating above her workstation. Red dots marked the locations where devourer attacks had been reported, stretching in a rough line from the outer rim toward the galactic core. They're not attacking randomly, Captain. Look at the pattern. Every target lies along this specific route. They're heading somewhere specific. Morrison studied the map. Where? Here. Rodriguez highlighted a point deep in the galactic core, in a region of space that most star charts marked as unexplored. Whatever they want, it's in the most dangerous part of the galaxy, a place where gravitational forces from the supermassive black hole make navigation nearly impossible. What could be worth going there? Rodriguez pulled up another display, this one showing ancient Federation records. I've been digging through the historical archives. 12,000 years ago, when the original Devourer War was ending, the Federation launched something called the Preservation Project. What kind of project? They took genetic samples, cultural records, and historical data from every known species in the galaxy. Everything that made each civilization unique. Then they loaded it all onto a massive archive ship and sent it to the safest place they could think of. Morrison felt his stomach drop. The galactic core. Exactly. A place so dangerous that nothing would ever think to look there. The perfect hiding spot for the accumulated knowledge of an entire galaxy. And now the Devourers are going after it. Rodriguez nodded grimly. If they get that archive, they won't just absorb the knowledge of current civilizations. They'll have access to the genetic patterns and cultural memories of thousands of extinct species. They could become something far worse than what we're fighting now. Morrison opened a communication channel to Admiral Collins. Within minutes, the senior command staff was gathered in the Defiance's briefing room. The mood was grim as Rodriguez explained her findings to the assembled officers. Admiral Collins studied the star charts with the expression of a man calculating impossible odds. How long do we have? Based on their current rate of advance, they'll reach the core in approximately 2 weeks, Rodriguez replied. Commander Lisa Park looked up from her tactical analysis. Admiral, we have maybe 60 ships left in fighting condition. The Devourers have been absorbing reinforcements from every system they've conquered. We're looking at facing thousands of enemy vessels, plus whatever defenses are already protecting the archive, added Captain Helen Ross from the UES Vengeance. That area of space wasn't chosen randomly. The gravitational shears alone will tear apart most ships. Collins was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands folded on the table. When he spoke, his voice was calm and determined. Recommendations? We should fall back and request reinforcement from Earth, suggested Captain Tony Blake from the destroyer UES Hammer. Get every ship we can and come back with a proper fleet. There isn't time, Morrison said. By the time we get back here, they'll have the archive. Game over for everyone, Park leaned forward. There might be another option. If we can't stop them from reaching the core, maybe we can stop them from getting what they came for. Explain. The archive ship. If it's been sitting there for 12,000 years, it's probably still operational. Ancient Federation technology was built to last. If we can reach it first, maybe we can destroy it before the Devourers arrive. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They would be destroying the last remnants of thousands of extinct civilizations, erasing the final traces of cultures that had taken millions of years to develop. Dr. Rodriguez spoke first. It would be genocide on a scale that's never been attempted before. We'd be murdering entire species that exist only in memory. They're already dead, Morrison said quietly. We'd just be making sure they stay that way instead of being turned into devourer breeding material. Admiral Collins stood up slowly. I need to think about this, dismissed. But as the other officers filed out, Collins called Morrison back. Jake, I want your honest opinion. Can we pull this off? Morrison looked at the star chart still displayed on the briefing room screen. The route to the Galactic core was marked in red, showing hazards that would challenge even the best human pilots. Honestly, sir, probably not. We'll lose most of the fleet just getting there. The survivors will have to fight through whatever the Devourers have waiting, plus whatever ancient defenses are protecting the archive. Then we'll have to find a way to destroy something the size of a small moon while under constant attack. Collins nodded. And you still think we should try? Yes, sir. Because the alternative is worse. 2 days later, the remaining human fleet began the journey toward the Galactic core. They had stripped their ships of everything non-essential, loading extra fuel and ammunition for what everyone knew would be a one-way trip. The journey was a nightmare. As they moved deeper into the core region, space itself seemed to turn hostile. Gravitational anomalies tossed ships around like toys. Radiation levels spiked beyond anything their shielding was designed to handle. Strange energy fields that Federation science couldn't explain interfered with their navigation systems. They lost the UES Courage to a gravity well that appeared without warning, crushing the destroyer in seconds. The US Liberty disappeared into what looked like a fold in space itself. By the time they reached the inner core region, only 37 ships remained. But they had beaten the Devourers there. The archive ship hung in space like a metal moon, its ancient hull scarred by thousands of years of radiation and micrometeor impacts. It was easily 10 times larger than the biggest human vessel, a testament to the engineering capabilities of civilizations long dead. My God, whispered Park as the Defiance approached the massive structure. It's been here all this time, keeping watch over the galaxy's memories. Morrison felt an unexpected sadness as he looked at the ancient ship. Somewhere in that hull were the final records of species that had once filled the galaxy with art, music, philosophy, and dreams. In a few hours, he would help destroy it all. Captain, Rodriguez called from her station, I'm detecting massive energy readings approaching from the outer system. The Devourers are here. On the main screen, the enemy fleet appeared like a dark tide flowing around the gravitational obstacles that had cost the humans so many ships. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, their living hulls pulsing with malevolent purpose. Admiral, Morrison called over the fleet channel. Time to go to work. Collins's voice came back steady and calm. All ships, this is it. We came here to do a job and we're going to finish it. Target the archive ship's main power cores. We're going to light this place up like the 4th of July. The final battle began as human ships dove toward the archive ship, their weapons blazing, The Devourers swarmed after them, but the gravitational fields that had been humanity's enemy now worked in their favor, disrupting the alien formations and forcing them to approach in smaller groups. Morrison watched as the UES Retribution, Admiral Collins's flagship, rammed directly into one of the archive ship's main power coupling stations. The explosion was visible across the entire system, a bright star that briefly outshone the galactic core itself. "All units," Morrison called over the radio. "The Admiral showed us the way. Let's finish what we started." One by one, the remaining human ships followed Collins's example, diving into suicide runs against the ancient vessel. The archive ship's defenses, dormant for millennia, finally awakened, but it was too late. As the UES Defiance made its final approach, Morrison looked back one last time at the Devourer fleet, now desperately trying to save their prize. He smiled grimly as he armed every weapon his ship carried. "Sorry about the mess," he said to the empty space where thousands of civilizations had once lived and dreamed. Then he gave the order that would end it all. The explosion at the galactic core was visible from 3 star systems away. The ancient archive ship, repository of a galaxy's worth of memories and dreams, died in a flash of light that briefly rivaled the central black hole itself. With it died the accumulated knowledge of thousands of extinct civilizations, and the last hope the Devourers had of becoming something far worse than they already were. Commander Lisa Park floated in an escape pod, watching the destruction through a cracked viewport. The UES Defiance was gone, along with Captain Morrison and most of her crew. Around her, the remains of the human fleet drifted in broken pieces, testament to the price of their desperate mission. But they had won. The Devourer fleet, deprived of their prize, began to fragment. Without the unifying goal that had driven them across the galaxy, the hive mind that controlled them started to break apart. Individual creatures turned on each other, fighting over the scraps of destroyed ships. Within hours, the organized swarm had become a chaotic mess of competing predators. Park's communicator crackled to life. "This is Lieutenant Sam Torres, UES Vigilant. Any survivors, please respond. Park here. Status report. We've got maybe a dozen ships still spaceworthy and about 300 survivors in escape pods scattered across the system. The Devourers are tearing each other apart. I think we broke them." Park felt a bitter satisfaction. They had come to the galactic core with 60 ships and 18,000 crew members. Less than 500 would be going home. By any measure except victory, it had been a disaster. 6 months later, Park stood in the Federation Council chambers on Serenity Prime, wearing the dress uniform she had hoped never to put on again. The chamber was packed with representatives from across the galaxy, all of them there to honor the humans who had saved their civilization. Council leader Vextar stood at the central podium, his forearms moving in formal gestures as he spoke. "Today we gather to recognize the greatest act of sacrifice in galactic history. When the ancient enemy returned to threaten all life, only one species answered our call for aid." Park barely listened to the formal speeches. She was thinking about Morrison, about Admiral Collins, about all the good people who had died in the dark between the stars. The Federation could give them all the medals and honors they wanted, but it wouldn't bring back a single human life. Dr. Maya Rodriguez sat beside her, one of the few senior officers to survive the final battle. She had been rescued from the archive ship's wreckage, somehow managing to download part of the ancient database before the destruction began. Not much, but something. "The Federation Council hereby grants humanity full membership status with all rights and privileges," Vextar continued. "We offer you choice territories in the inner systems, advanced technology sharing agreements, and preferential trade status throughout Federation space." When Park was called to the podium to accept on behalf of Earth, she kept her response brief. "The United Earth government accepts these honors, but we have some conditions of our own." The chamber fell silent. "This wasn't part of the planned ceremony. We're establishing the Galactic Defense Corps," Park announced. "A military organization designed to respond to threats like the Devourers. Any species can contribute ships and personnel, but the command structure will be human." Several council members began to protest, but Vextar raised his hands for silence. "What exactly are you proposing, Commander?" "We're proposing that someone needs to stand guard while the rest of you sleep peacefully in your beds. The Devourers are gone, but Dr. Rodriguez found evidence of other threats in the archive data. Ancient things sleeping in dark places waiting for the right moment to wake up. Park activated a holographic display showing star charts with marked danger zones. There are at least 6 other dormant threats scattered across the galaxy. Things that make the Devourers look like a minor inconvenience. The Federation's diplomatic approach won't work against them. And you believe humans should be responsible for dealing with these threats? Asked Dr. Nalseth, the green-tentacled scientist. I believe someone has to be, Park replied. And we're the only species crazy enough to volunteer. The debate that followed lasted for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Federation had learned what happened when they ignored military threats, and they weren't eager to repeat the experience. 2 years later, Park stood on the bridge of the UES Guardian, flagship of the Galactic Defense Corps. The ship was a hybrid of human engineering and Federation technology, bristling with weapons but also equipped with the most advanced sensors and communication systems the galaxy could provide. Her crew was mixed now, with humans working alongside volunteers from a dozen different species. It had taken time to integrate the different approaches to warfare, but Park had found that other species could learn to fight when properly motivated. "Commander," called Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. He had been promoted after the Corps battle, one of the few veterans of that desperate fight still on active duty. "We're receiving a distress call from the Andromeda Research Station. They report contact with unknown vessels." Park felt the familiar tightness in her stomach that came with potential threats. "Classification? Unknown. The description matches some of the warnings Dr. Rodriguez found in the archive data. Ancient technology, possibly automated. Set course for Andromeda Station. All ships, battle stations." As the Defense Corps fleet changed course toward the new threat, Park thought about the memorial that had been erected on Serenity Prime. 300 meters of black stone with the names of every human who had died fighting the Devourers. The inscription at the base was simple. "They came from a world of death to give us life." Park had visited the memorial only once. She found it too depressing. The dead didn't need monuments, they needed to be remembered by the living. And the best way to honor their sacrifice was to make sure it hadn't been wasted. "ETA to Andromeda Station?" she asked. 18 hours at maximum burn, Torres replied. "Make it 12. I want to get there before whatever woke up has time to figure out where it is." On Earth, in a small apartment in what used to be called New York, an old woman sat in her garden, tending to flowers that had never grown naturally in Earth's harsh environment. Dr. Maya Rodriguez had retired from active duty after the archive battle, but she continued her research from home. The data she had recovered from the ancient ship was incomplete, but it told a story that both fascinated and terrified her. The galaxy was old, far older than anyone had realized. Civilizations had risen and fallen in cycles stretching back billions of years, and each time they fell, they left behind guardians to watch over what came next. The Devourers had been one such guardian, designed to prevent any single species from growing too powerful. But something had gone wrong with their programming, turning protectors into destroyers. Rodriguez suspected that humanity's intervention had triggered something larger, an awakening of systems that had been dormant for eons. The galaxy was about to discover that it was not as empty as it seemed. Her communicator chimed with an incoming message from Commander Park. "Doctor, we need your expertise. We've found something that matches your predictions about ancient technology." Rodriguez smiled as she put down her gardening tools. Retirement would have to wait a little longer. In space, the UES Guardian and her escorts raced toward humanity's next battle, carrying the flag of a species that had learned to fight not for conquest or glory, but for the simple right of others to exist in peace. The Deathworlders had answered the galaxy's call for aid, and they would keep answering it for as long as threats remained in the dark between the stars. It was, after all, what they did best. Behind them, in the peaceful systems of the Inner Federation, billions of beings slept safely in their beds, protected by the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, humans stood guard. And when the next threat came, as Rodriguez's data suggested it inevitably would, there would be no desperate search for help across the galaxy. The call would go out on a single frequency, to a species that had never learned to say no to a fight worth fighting. The Deathworlders would answer. They always did.